Police are looking for armed robbers involved in a violent smash and grab robbery at a jewelry store in El Monte.
The burglars enter through the roof, then cut their way in from a neighboring business.
Thieves burst in, smashed the display cases, and shoved workers to the ground.
Thousands and thousands of dollars worth of merchandise gone.
Hi, I'm Mark Smelzer, Chief Content Executive at the Jewelers Mutual Group, and it's my honor to moderate this 5-part series on jewelry crime. We have an esteemed panel of 3 experts: John Kennedy, President of the Jewelers Security Alliance. From Canada, we have Kelly Ross, Managing Director of Jewelers Vigilance Canada. And representing the retail side, we have Michael Richards, Vice President of Underwood's Jewelers in Jacksonville, Florida, and the former President of the American Gem Society. We'll discuss in the first episode the overall state of crime. In the next 3 episodes, we'll discuss specific types of crimes. And in the 5th episode, we will discuss the emotional impact of crime. After each episode, we'll post a list of further resources. And we truly hope that you find these videos informative and helpful. Hi, John, Michael, and Kelly, thank you so much for being here for yet another episode of our Crime Awareness series. This episode's topic is a little bit harder than some of the others, and it's about the emotional impact of crime. You've got people working in a store, crimes occur, it's going to impact them emotionally. So, Kelly, would you like to kick us off with a general description?
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of framed it in there, Mark, about the environment that we're actually working in these days. There's been an increase in crime. People might be actually involved in an event that happens at their store, and that can leave a mark, a traumatic scar per se. But I think we can even back the truck up a little bit and go to the events that everybody hears about and how that raises the levels of anxiety about just working in this environment right now. And that's what we're talking about, is that emotional impact that that the current environment has on people in the jewelry industry.
Michael, I'm sure you've had experience with this. You have a lot of people in your employ, and if something like this happens, you really need to look out for them.
You really do, and you need to be very cognizant that different people process what has happened differently. And you can be very, very surprised as a leader or a store manager how that looks with your team. We haven't had a major armed robbery or anything like that in many years, but if I go back to when we did have one in the 1990s, there were people that worked for us that I maybe would have called them fragile before this happened. And some of those people got up off the floor, brushed off their suit jacket, and went back to work. And then we had other employees that I would have considered to be tough guys that fell apart a little bit and had trouble sleeping, didn't want to come back to work, just truly was personality changing for them. You can't really predict how someone is going to react when they're put in a situation where there is a potential for violence. I think that you have to watch and see how your employees are acting and reacting after the event, and then you have to consider what options you have as far as counseling or maybe easing that person back into the job a little bit at a time until they feel comfortable again. My experience has been that it can be life-changing for people in a negative way.
Yeah. And I imagine just keeping the lines of communication really wide open, right? And just making sure that everyone feels as comfortable as they need to come forward with concerns.
Oh, absolutely. Again, you can't predict how someone's going to process this. And I think that we owe it to them as their employer to help them overcome whatever difficulties it causes them. And hopefully they can return and be as effective as they were before.
Right. John, what sort of advice do you give from a JSA point of view?
Well, I mean, just before the advice part, I mean, we've seen owners close their store after a crime. We've seen people quit. We've seen people their spouses make them quit. Their spouses say, you can't do this job anymore. You got to get another job. We see this regularly. And so it's very traumatic. Obviously, the violent incidents are really where it hits home, much more than even the grab and run or something. That is some trauma there, but it's not the same. I think that the thing that as the post event things that they just recommended were very, very good. The pre-event things would be to have staff meetings regularly in which you do a little role playing and you do a little run through scenarios to keep people aware of how they should act if these things happen. If people have more confidence that they can not be hurt, that they can act, and that's the message. If you don't resist, you're not going to be hurt. Don't resist. You got insurance. That's it. So
Right.
if they're confident in that, then I think that the trauma won't be quite so bad. And I think that those types of orientations on a relatively frequent but brief basis. I mean, we're not talking about giving an hour lecture. We're talking about 5 minutes maybe of just a little advice can be a very big help.
Do folks ever do role play in their stores just to sort of practice what might happen,
Some
or is
do.
it just more?
I've heard people do that, sure. And I don't know. I don't know how widespread it is, but I've heard of that over the years.
Great, and I would imagine there are counseling resources that people can turn to, correct?
Well, there are. I mean, you'd be using a local service, or sometimes your insurance supports that effort. But you're going to be using a local service of psychologists or counselors, etc. Another thing you could do is you could have a local police community service person come into your store to do a little lecture or a little talk about crime, making people think that you're, and the staff wants to see that the store is on top of security. They want to see that they have their back, and so that's another thing you could conceivably do.
Kelly, is there something that you could add? I see you're nodding.
Yeah, John knocked off. I had two things I wanted to mention. John knocked off one of them. The victim service units at the local police detachments or precincts are excellent resources for, framing in what's happening with crime and providing some assurances of what's being done on the police side. And I think there's some comfort in that. But Michael kind of talked about this in having those regular conversations with staff, and John was touching on it as well. And I would add to that ask the specific questions of the staff as how they're feeling about the right now, about the state of crime. Has it got them in an anxious state? Do they feel uncomfortable coming to work because of it? Get a sense of that before something happens. And if you find out that that's the case, maybe engage somebody in a preemptive manner, engage an anxiety coach or a counselor in a preemptive manner to talk to them about this before something happens, to bring that anxiety level down.
I would think the challenge is real, especially at the retail level, because this is an industry of beautiful things. It's an industry of joyous occasions. We all talk about the emotional attachment that folks have to jewelry that they don't have to a cell phone or some other, item. And so, you're largely in an environment of beauty and joy, and then suddenly these things can happen. So anything else that you want to add, Michael, about maybe how you balance that? You don't want to scare people, and you want them to experience the joy, but you don't want them to be naive, I guess.
Well, I think you just summed up one of the greatest challenges we have in retail jewelry is you definitely want your staff to be very aware of everything that could happen, but you don't want to scare them to the point where they can't effectively do their job.
Right.
And that is a very delicate line to walk, very difficult line to walk as well. We're very lucky to have people in our industry like Kelly and John and their organizations that provide us a lot of the tools that we need to have these hard conversations. And we just hope we're doing the right things and coaching our team the right way, that things will work out if we ever do have an unfortunate incident.
Fantastic. Yeah, I guess the big picture takeaway is just be aware that these things could happen, prepare for them, and be as smart as possible. So this is the end of the 5-part series. To the viewer, if you haven't watched the other episodes, please do so. They're all really informative. And John, Michael, and Kelly, we can't thank you enough. You've been great on these calls, and the information is really, really vital and much appreciated. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks,
Mark.
Mark.